Today, I'm going to talk about the 5 best ways to prepare for an upcoming job interview. Hi, I'm Kevin from Interview Victory, and back in the old days, whenever I got an interview, I would be really excited. And then I would do absolutely nothing to prepare for it. I'd probably wait till the night before, go into my closet, make sure I had some decent things to wear, and then the next day I'd show up assuming that I would just know what to say when they started asking me questions. In fact, the notion that I should prepare answers ahead of time, it seemed to me kind of like cheating. I mean, isn't the point for them to see if they like me based on my honest answers in the moment? Well, after completely messing up 2 or 3 interviews, and still with no job in sight, I decided that maybe it was better to try something different, like actually preparing for my interviews. Of course, this was back in the day where YouTube didn't exist at the time. You couldn't just go online and search up some great videos on interview preparation back then. The best you had were blog articles. Now, in a way, that was probably better for me because it forced me to go find help, one-on-one help with someone to help me prepare for my upcoming interview. In fact, I was so upset about my terrible interview performances that I actually I paid a professional interview coach to help me. Now, of course, that made all the difference. And I was so impressed by how much better I did in my next interview that I became sort of a nerd about the topic of interview preparation. I mean, considering the fact that after I got interview help, I was offered every single position that I interviewed for after that. Pretty impressive. So to me, interview preparation is sort of like a superpower for those who choose to practice it. How cool is it that the difference between no interview preparation and just a few hours of it can get you life-altering results, such as getting that dream job? So as you can see, I'm a huge fan of preparation. I think it's one of the most underrated aspects of career development, something that people simply don't practice enough. The truth is that people who are good at interviewing are more likely to get great jobs and better opportunities. It's as simple as that. So that said, let's talk about the first thing you should do once you receive an interview invitation. But before I do that, I just want to encourage you to download my Day of the Interview checklist. Now, this is a free PDF checklist that I've made available to help you become super prepared for your upcoming interview. All you got to do is click on the link in the description below to download it, print it out a few days before your interview, and start checking off everything on that list to make sure that you have everything you need in terms of what to bring, what to think about, what to wear. And if you like getting tips from an interview insider who's been helping candidates with interviews for over a decade, make sure to click on the subscribe button down below and click on that bell icon to make sure you get notified whenever we put out new videos. And one of my first recommendations is to create a list of interview questions that you're most likely to get in your interview. Now, this isn't just going on the internet, typing common questions for interviews, and then copying and pasting everything into a list. That's because interviews for different types of jobs in different industries are obviously going to have questions that are unique and specialized for that particular type of job and industry. You'd better believe that if you're going to an interview at a startup in Silicon Valley for maybe a software developer position, you're likely to get lots of technical and brain teaser-like questions in your interview compared to someone who's going for maybe a social worker interview, right? But the good news is there are some fantastic resources out there for creating a set of specialized interview questions for the exact type of interview you're going to. I'm going to put a few links down in the description below under the heading Interview Questions, so just check those out to get started. Now let's move on to the second thing you need to make sure you're super prepared for, which is to do some in-depth research about the company or organization that you're going to be interviewing with. Want to know what one of the worst things you can do in an interview is? It's to show up knowing little to nothing about the place you're interviewing for or the people you're interviewing with. As someone who spent a long time interviewing as a hiring manager and on numerous candidate selection committees, believe me when I say that this can make or break you. The danger isn't just that you're not going to look as good as other candidates, is that showing up to an interview knowing nothing about the company or organization is basically a slap in the face of the people who are interviewing you. At least that's how they'll see it. I remember many candidates that seemed very promising throughout their interview until we got to a question like, why do you want to work for us? Then it would become very clear that they had done absolutely zero research into who we were and what we did as a company. And this indicated to my colleagues and I, 2 things basically. Either they were inexperienced, didn't know how to interview, or they were lazy, possibly both. But it also showed us that they didn't care much about the opportunity that they were interviewing for. So do some research about the company or organization or the program, the university, whatever it is. Make sure that you can talk about what you like. So do some serious research about what the company or organization or university, what are they known for? What do they stand for? And if you can talk about any personal connection you feel with them, what their brand means to you, or what you like about the industry, even better. If you are going and interviewing for an academic program, besides showing them that you know about the school, tell them why you feel connected to that school, why it feels like home to you. Same with the company. Talk about why you feel like you'd be a good fit here. And don't just say generic, vague things like, oh, I like the people, they're really nice here. Talk about certain aspects, specific things that you've found about the company that showcase that you've researched them so that there's no doubt that you've done your homework. So my third piece of advice is more of a fun one, at least for some of you, and others maybe not. But it's to be strategic about the clothes that you're going to wear on the day of the interview. As I mentioned, when I first started interviewing, I was completely clueless about clothes, and even more clueless about how to dress strategically for an interview. The truth is, I did what a lot of candidates do. They hear about how you're supposed to dress nice for an interview, and so they dress according to what they think looks good. But because the majority of the people don't actually know how to dress very well, sorry to say, what most people think looks good simply falls short. Now, hopefully you're not one of these people, but I was, so I'm happy to admit it. It's not good enough just to rummage through your closet, find the best stuff you have and the best stuff you can, and then throw it on and hope for the best. When certain people do this in their interviews, it can result in walking disasters, and that's not what I want. No, instead I want to challenge you to get some second and third opinions about how you look for your interview from people you trust on the topic of fashion, clothing, and what to wear. Even for people who do consider themselves fashion experts, always better to get a second opinion. I'm sorry, it just is. And guess what? That means you'll probably have to dress up a few days or weeks before your interview in your interview attire to make sure that you get some feedback in time. I remember one of my first interviews out of college. I showed up to an interview and I clearly remember seeing about 10 other male candidates for the job, fresh out of college just like me. And guess what? They looked exactly the same as each other. They were all wearing almost the same looking black slacks, a bright blue dress shirt, and this shimmery metallic looking tie. And besides the fact that shimmering ties are hard to take seriously in a business setting, the other major problem with this is that they all looked like each other, which means that to the interviewers, it would have been hard to remember any of them in particular. Now, I don't have too much time to go into how to dress for interviews in this video. It's a huge topic that I promise to make more videos about in the future. But let me give you a quick hint about how to find some great styles, modern ones, for an upcoming interview quick and easily. I want you to go down, again, into the description and find a heading that I'm going to put down there called Dressing Your Best for an Interview. I'm going to put a few links down there, some great examples for female interview attire and some great examples for male interview attire, so please check those out. And my next tip on how to make sure you're prepared for an upcoming interview is to create outlines for each of the most important questions that you're likely to get on your next interview. And what I want you to do is to take that list that we talked about earlier, the 20 questions that are industry or job specific, the ones that you came up with. And I want you to choose the 10 questions that you think are most likely to be asked on that interview. Now you can do all 20 if you want, but I want to give you, basically this is the baseline. Do a minimum of 10. And then what I want you to do is to create an outline of what you would say for each of those questions. I want you to write them out, but I don't want you to make them into word for word kind of paragraphs. I want them to be 5 to 10 bullet points each. Because some people go overboard with this. They'll write out word for word an entire 3,000 word essay, and that's going to get you into major trouble. You need to start practicing the art of being succinct, not too wordy. You may not realize it, but having an outline of what you're going to say in response to questions is like going into your interview ready for battle versus at a loss for words of what you should talk about next. Now here's a little bonus tip, which is I think at this point it would be a good idea to start a journal or a notebook, an interview journal or notebook that you can keep all these interview notes. Take the responses that you've created for this interview and then you can use those down in future interviews. I think it's always good to have these written down somewhere, and it's nice to have just one little journal or one notebook that you have just for interviewing. Now finally, the last piece of advice I want to give you for preparing for your interview is to do a mock interview. Now some of you might be wondering, well, what exactly is that? A mock interview, as the name implies, is a pseudo or practice interview that you can do before your upcoming actual interview. And you can do this interview with a friend or even a family member, but I really recommend that you consider doing the mock interview with a professional interview coach, like the kind that I worked with at the beginning of my interview journey. Now there's a few reasons for this, but one is that they have so much more experience, usually interviewing hundreds, if not thousands of candidates before you, compared to most people's friends or family. Plus, I find that friends and family, they're usually not critical enough to be really good mock interviewers. They're often too close to you, they already like you, right? So it usually makes them a bit biased, and you end up not getting that direct feedback that you need that maybe a stranger who's never met you will give you. Finally, interview coaches know all the subtleties and the nuances of what makes someone really shine in their interview, stand out, versus someone who just doesn't make the cut. They can help you transform yourself into a much more competitive candidate overall. Now, there's a lot of places you can go to find an interview coach. I mean, we do mock interviews and coaching here at Interview Victory, but either way, consider finding a professional coach, because if you think about it, if they help you land that new job, which pays way more than what you're making right now, the increase in salary that you're going to get is worth whatever small investment you put into some interview coaching. That said, if you decide not to work with a professional, I at least encourage you to do a mock interview anyway with a family member, with a friend, or someone that you trust. Feedback is so critical for making sure that your answers that you've outlined and written down right and spent a lot of time with, that they sound reasonable and compelling. And you need to get that from somebody besides yourself. Okay, so those are my top 5 tips for interview preparation for those of you who have an upcoming job or academic interview. And if you like this video, why not consider joining our Interview Victory course? It's filled with tons of awesome tips, exercises, strategies, and that coaching aspect to help you become the best candidate you can possibly be. And it's geared to help you get the edge over your competitors so that you can land that perfect job or get into that cutthroat academic program. To learn more about Interview Victory, check out the link at the very top of the description below. Make sure to check out some of our other great interview videos. And again, don't forget to subscribe to this channel by clicking on the button below, ringing that bell, and I will see you in the next video about interviewing.